Everyone said she'll never survive, but she proved them wrong. The morning wind tugged at the flags over the subdivision entrance with unusual force, and somewhere down the block, a UPS truck chirped its insistent backup warning. Leora sat very still on the warm concrete step of the front porch, her small body compact and purposeful, as if she had chosen this exact spot the way some creatures choose migration routes written in their bones. Her left ear, slightly smaller than the right, turned only halfway toward the street sounds. The right one, however, swiveled like a satellite dish, mapping the world in careful detail. She registered the coffee smell drifting through the screen door behind her, the particular rhythm of footsteps inside the house, the motion sensor light that blinked twice each evening as twilight settled, as if saying, "This is the place." The humans had been saying other things entirely. She'd heard it in their body language, in the way doors closed with hesitation, in the careful avoidance of eye contact. Winter would be harsh this year, they said. The Homeowners Association didn't tolerate animals lingering outside common areas. Nobody needed one more responsibility right now. Leora understood through observation what her limited hearing couldn't catch. She read the world through gestures and patterns, through the tightness in shoulders and the speed of closing doors. And yet, despite the unspoken discouragement, she had stayed. 3 qualities guided her choices: a calm stubbornness that never became frantic, a methodical approach to routes and routines, and an uncanny ability to sense human sadness. She could detect it the way other animals sensed storms coming, something in the air shifting before the visible signs appeared. Inside her small frame, a conflict stretched her pupils wide in moments of decision. She wanted shelter and a steady hand offering food. She wanted the kind of warmth that didn't depend on finding sun patches or heat vents. But she also feared losing the freedom that had kept her alive this long, the ability to choose her own path, to leave when danger approached. Her first objective was simple in concept but enormous in execution: survive the autumn without becoming a problem. Gain enough trust to earn a winter spot without triggering complaints or official interventions. Her second goal lived further out, hazier but compelling: secure a window that would always open for her, a guaranteed point of return. The final aim, still forming in her careful mind, was to protect a routine that smelled like home, something predictable and safe that she could count on when the world turned chaotic. The first real event seemed almost trivial when it happened. The UPS truck's backup alarm grew suddenly, shockingly loud as it reversed near the curb. Leora didn't startle. Instead, she laid down with her right ear toward the street and her left ear against the warm concrete, a choice that revealed more than she intended. Later, this small detail would explain several things that seemed mysterious at first. That same afternoon, Ansel Marwick emerged from the house next door. He was a man who organized Sunday newspaper coupons by category and kept the HOA regulations in a labeled folder on his kitchen counter. His movements were precise, almost military in their efficiency, but his eyes held something gentler. He glanced around the quiet street, then set down a bowl of water near the doormat, decorated with autumn leaves. The gesture violated HOA regulations about encouraging strays, but he did it anyway, his face carefully neutral. Leora approached the bowl slowly, testing the air. When she got close enough to smell the lingering scent of dish detergent in the water, she pulled back and retreated to her porch step. The water was clean and safe, but the artificial lemon scent overwhelmed her sensitive nose. Ansel watched from his window, making a mental note. Some cats were particular about smells. He'd try unscented next time. The real turning point came on Saturday morning, when the autumn air carried that specific crispness that promised an early winter. The parking lot of the neighborhood grocery store had been transformed into a temporary adoption fair, with portable kennels and hand-painted signs propped against shopping cart corrals. Cerise Blum, a volunteer from the county animal shelter, had arrived at dawn to set up. She was a woman in her early 50s with reading glasses hanging from a beaded chain and a tote bag full of printed flyers. She'd learned to be efficient about these events, slipping adoption information between the Target weekly ads and community bulletins that people actually picked up. Leora had been making her morning rounds, following a route she'd developed over weeks. The route took her past the dumpsters behind the Thai restaurant, where clean cardboard provided shelter, through the hedge gap that led to the community mailbox area, and finally to the grocery store loading zone where delivery trucks sometimes spilled interesting scraps. But this morning, The parking lot offered something different. Leora paused at the edge of the setup, watching humans interact with the caged cats. The other cats looked anxious, pacing in their small spaces. She studied them, processing what their presence meant. Cerise noticed her immediately. A grey tabby observing from the perimeter, calm and unhurried, with an intelligent wariness in her posture. She wasn't begging or approaching, just watching. "Hey there, sweetheart," Cerise said softly, crouching down but keeping her distance. "You don't look like you belong to anyone." Leora's ears swiveled toward the sound. The woman's voice was low and even, without the sharp edges that signaled danger. When Cerise extended her hand, palm down and still, Leora took 3 cautious steps forward. She sniffed the offered fingers, then surprised both of them by rubbing the side of her face against Cerise's pant leg. The gesture was brief, but deliberate. Then she sat down right there by Cerise's shoes and stayed. "Oh," Cerise said quietly, understanding dawning. "Now you're choosing me, aren't you?" The intention to help formed right there in the grocery store parking lot, but the first obstacle rose up just as quickly. Cerise lived in an apartment complex with a strict pet policy. Ansel's place, the one where Leora had claimed the porch, was better positioned but came with complications. It was a second-floor unit in a building where the HOA required approved window screens for any cat owner, screens that cost $200 per window and required a formal application process. Ansel also already had Olav, an elderly German shepherd with arthritis and a gentle disposition but very definite territorial instincts. Cost, paperwork, neighbor scrutiny, each factor stacked on top of the others, creating a wall that seemed insurmountable. But Cerise had spent 5 years volunteering at the shelter. She'd learned that the hardest cases to place were the ones that chose you, the animals that looked at you and decided you were their person. Those were the ones worth fighting for. "Okay," she said to Leora, who was still sitting by her feet. "Okay, we'll figure this out." Leora's right ear turned toward her voice, catching the commitment in those words, even if the specific meaning remained unclear. What happened next would require patience and resourcefulness, small victories earned through careful attention to detail. It would cost money nobody had set aside, and time nobody felt they could spare. It would require navigating bureaucratic systems designed to discourage exceptions. But that Saturday morning, with autumn sun warming the asphalt and Leora finally choosing trust over survival instinct, the decision was made. The question that hung in the air, unspoken but present, was simple and enormous. Could a small cat with a hearing problem and a neighborhood full of regulations find a way to make it through winter? October arrived with its ritual decorations. Pumpkins appeared on porches throughout the subdivision, some carved with elaborate designs, others simply painted and arranged in aesthetic clusters. The autumn colors that tourists drove hours to see painted the trees along every street, though the residents barely noticed anymore. Beauty becomes invisible when you see it every day. Cerise had taken on Leora's care with a practical determination that surprised even her. She'd contacted Ansel after the adoption fair, explaining the situation with careful diplomacy. He'd listened without interruption, then asked 3 specific questions. Was the cat healthy? Was she aggressive? Would she tolerate Olav? "I don't know yet," Cerise had answered honestly, "but she chose my hand to rub against. That means something." Ansel had nodded. "Bring her by tomorrow. We'll see how Olav reacts." The introduction had gone better than anyone expected. Olav had sniffed Leora with professional thoroughness, his tail wagging slowly. Leora had stood perfectly still, letting herself be examined, her posture neither submissive nor challenging. After a long moment, Olav had simply walked away and lowered himself onto his orthopedic bed with a heavy sigh. "That's approval," Ansel had said. He would have told us if he objected. So Leora had gained entry to the second-floor apartment, though the situation remained temporary. The HOA screen requirement still loomed, and winter was advancing faster than anyone wanted. The first challenge appeared within days. Cerise had purchased supplies from the pet store, following the recommendations of the adoption center coordinator. A litter box with high sides, fresh meadow, scented litter that promised superior odor control, matching food and water bowls in cheerful ceramic. She'd set everything up in Ansel's bathroom, away from Olav's territory, creating what she thought was a perfect private space. Leora took one sniff of the litter box, sneezed violently 3 times, and walked away with her tail rigid. She wouldn't go near it. She hates it, Ansel observed, stating the obvious. But it's supposed to be the best kind, Cerise said, reading the package label again. Natural odor control, clumps for easy cleaning. Look at her, Ansel said. Leora was sitting in the hallway, as far from the bathroom as she could get while still watching them. Her nose twitched with visible distress, and her eyes had narrowed to slits. The scent, Cerise said slowly. She hated the smell of my dish soap on the water bowl too. Ansel, I think she's got a sensitivity to artificial fragrances. They'd made an emergency trip to 3 different pet stores before finding unscented litter. The plain clay kind, nothing fancy, no promises of meadow freshness or mountain rain. Cerise had also replaced all the ceramic bowls with stainless steel ones that had been washed in hot water, with no soap at all. The transformation was immediate. Leora used the new litter box within an hour. She drank from the water bowl without hesitation. The tension in her small body visibly released. That was expensive trial and error, Ansel commented, looking at the receipt. And worth every dollar, Cerise replied. She was telling us what she needed. We just had to listen. But listening had cost them nearly a week of stress and over $100 in supplies they couldn't use. The lesson was clear. Leora's particular needs would require attention and resources beyond standard cat care. As Halloween approached, another pattern emerged. The subdivision always made a production of the holiday, with competing decoration displays and designated trick-or-treat hours posted on the community board. Parents walked the streets in organized groups, children's costumes glowing with reflective tape and LED additions. Ansel's apartment was on a corner, which meant double the foot traffic. The doorbell rang constantly between 6 and 8 o'clock. Each time, Olaf would lumber to his feet with an arthritic groan and bark his deep, booming announcement. Leora hated it. The first few rings she tried to hide under Ansel's bed, but the space was too exposed, too easy to see into. She tried the bathroom next, but the sound echoed worse in there. Finally, she discovered the narrow gap behind Ansel's bedroom bookshelf, a space barely wide enough for her body, and wedged herself into it. When Cerise checked on her an hour later, she found Leora pressed into the corner, her pupils enormous, her breathing rapid. "Oh, honey," Cerise said softly, "this is too much, isn't it?" She couldn't move Leora, not without causing more stress. Instead, she grabbed a throw blanket from the couch and carefully draped it over the gap between the bookshelf and the wall, creating a darker, more enclosed space. The effect was immediate. Leora's breathing slowed. She stayed in her hiding spot for the rest of the evening, but the panic edge had softened. She needs control over her environment, Cerise told Ansel later, after the trick-or-treaters had finally dispersed. She can't handle the unpredictability. Most cats are like that, Ansel said. But most cats don't have a hearing problem, Cerise countered. She can't locate sounds properly. Everything comes at her from unexpected directions. No wonder she's anxious. Ansel was quiet for a moment, thinking. We need to give her more hiding options. And maybe routines, predictable things she can count on. It was the first time either of them had used the word we without qualification. The first acknowledgement that this wasn't temporary anymore. That night, after Cerise had gone home and the apartment had settled into quiet, Leora emerged from behind the bookshelf. She did a full patrol of the space, checking each room methodically. When she reached the living room, she discovered something new. The evening news was on, volume low. Ansel had fallen asleep in his recliner with Olaf snoring beside him. On the television screen, the weather forecast played with its familiar opening jingle, a simple 3-note melody that preceded every local broadcast. Leora's ears perked up. The sound was consistent, predictable, the same 3 notes in the same order. And after those notes came the weather map with its bright colors and simple graphics. She jumped onto the back of Ansel's chair, moving carefully to avoid waking him. Then she settled there, watching the weather forecast with focused attention. Ansel woke 20 minutes later to find her still there, her body warm against his shoulder, her gaze fixed on the screen. "You like the weather report?" he asked quietly. Leora's right ear swiveled toward his voice, but she didn't move otherwise. Ansel reached up slowly and ran one finger along the side of her face, the gentle stroke Cerise had taught him. Leora leaned into the touch, just slightly, and began to purr. The sound was uneven, almost rusty, like an engine that hadn't been used in years but still remembered how to run. "Okay," Ansel said, "we can make this work." But even as he spoke, he was calculating costs in his head. The HOA screen application would require a filing fee and installation quotes from approved contractors. The special unscented litter cost twice as much as regular brands. The upcoming winter would mean higher heating bills with a cat that seemed to seek out warm spots. And underneath all the practical concerns lay a deeper question. What happened if the HOA rejected their screen application? Where would Leora go when the real cold arrived? The question sat there between hope and doubt, waiting for an answer neither of them had yet. The first hard frost came in early November, earlier than the weather forecasters had predicted. It turned the remaining flowers in the subdivision planters into brown mush overnight and left geometric ice patterns on car windows. Cerise arrived at Ansel's apartment on that crystal cold morning with a worried expression and a pet store bag. The HOA rejection came, she said, without preamble. They denied the screen application. Ansel had been expecting it, but the confirmation still felt like a door closing. What was their reason? Multiple factors, Cerise read from the letter. Inconsistent with building aesthetics, potential impact on property values, concerns about setting precedents for other residents. She folded the paper with sharp, angry creases. Translation: they don't want to deal with it. Leora appeared in the hallway, her morning routine interrupted by the tension in Cerise's voice. She sat down and watched them both, her tail curved around her paws. "We can appeal," Ansel said. "The appeal process takes 3 months minimum." Cerise gestured toward the window, where frost patterns were still visible. Winter isn't going to wait for bureaucracy. They sat in silence for a moment, the problem settling around them like the cold settling into the building's walls. "She can't go outside unsupervised," Cerise said finally. "Not with her hearing. She wouldn't hear a car coming. And we can't keep her locked inside 24 hours a day," Ansel added. "She needs environmental stimulation. So we're stuck." "No," Ansel said slowly. "We're just working with different constraints than we planned." He got up and walked to the window, looking out at the frost-covered subdivision. "When I was deployed overseas, we had a saying, 'Accomplish the mission with what you have, not what you wish you had.'" Cerise joined him at the window. "Military wisdom applies to cat care. Strategy applies to everything." He pointed down at the parking lot. "Look, the snow's going to pile up down there. The HOA has already sent out the winter parking restrictions. People are going to be frustrated cold dealing with ice and salt and dead batteries. And," Cerise prompted, "and nobody notices what doesn't cause them problems." Ansel turned to look at Leora, who was now washing her paw with meticulous attention. "We make her invisible by making her convenient. We follow every other HOA rule perfectly. We keep her quiet, keep her contained, make zero complaints about anything else. We become the residents they never have to think about." "That's actually brilliant," Cerise said. "It's survival strategy," Ansel corrected. "Make yourself valuable by being low maintenance." But strategy still required resources. The immediate problem was temperature. Ansel's apartment was well insulated, but relied on a central heating system controlled by building management. The thermostat was locked to prevent individual adjustments, set to 68 degrees during the day and 65 at night. Comfortable for humans in sweaters. Potentially rough for a small cat who'd been living outside. Cerise pulled a thermal cat bed from the pet store bag. "I bought this, but I'm worried it's not enough." Ansel examined it. The bed was well made but passive, relying on the cat's body heat to warm a reflective liner. "She needs active heat, something reliable. Like a heating pad? Too risky if she lies on it too long. Burns." Ansel pulled out his phone and started searching. "We need something with a thermostat. Automatic shutoff. Low energy consumption." He found it 20 minutes later. A veterinary-grade heated pet mat designed for post-surgery recovery. Temperature-controlled, covered in washable fabric, with a chew-proof cord. The price made Cerise wince. "That's half my grocery budget for the month." "I'll cover it," Ansel said. "Consider it a building improvement." The mat arrived 2 days later. They set it up near the living room vent where Leora had been sleeping, tucking it partially under the couch to create a cave-like enclosure. The temperature was set to the lowest setting, just enough to take the edge off the floor's chill. Leora investigated it immediately. She stepped onto the mat, paused as the warmth registered, then circled 3 times before settling down with a long, satisfied exhale. "She likes it," Cerise said unnecessarily. "She's claimed it," Ansel corrected. "There's a difference." But the heated mat brought its own complications. Ansel's electricity bill jumped by $15 the first month. Not catastrophic, but noticeable in his carefully balanced budget. He started turning off other devices to compensate, unplugging the coffee maker between uses, switching to LED bulbs in every socket, letting dishes air dry instead of running the heated cycle. Small sacrifices, easy enough to make individually. Together, they represented a shift in how he lived in his own space. The furniture arrangement had to change too. The heated mats cord needed to reach an outlet, which meant moving the couch 3 inches forward. That created a gap behind it that accumulated dust, requiring more frequent cleaning. The new cleaning schedule meant buying a better vacuum with attachments that could reach the narrow spaces. More cost, more time, more adjustment. Cerise noticed these changes during her daily visits. "You're reorganizing your whole life around her." "We," Ansel corrected. "We're reorganizing. You're here every day." It was true. Cerise had developed her own routine. Stop by before work to refill Leora's water bowl with fresh, cold water that had been sitting overnight to let any chlorine smell dissipate. Stop by during lunch to spend 15 minutes playing with the feather wand toy, making sure Leora got exercise even though she couldn't go outside. Stop by after work to brush her, careful to use gentle strokes that didn't pull at her fur. 3 stops a day, 5 days a week. The gas money added up. The time commitment meant rearranging her work schedule, taking shorter breaks, staying late to compensate. "Maybe I'm crazy," Cerise said one evening, sitting on Ansel's floor while Leora chased a toy mouse, "spending this much energy on a cat who isn't even officially mine." "She's not officially anyone's," Ansel pointed out. That's sort of the problem and the solution at the same time. Leora batted the mouse under the bookshelf where it remained stuck. She sat down and stared at the gap, making a small, frustrated chirping sound. "I'll get it," Cerise started to say, but Ansel held up a hand. "Wait, watch." They watched. Leora studied the problem for a long moment, then reached one paw under the shelf, patting around methodically. When that didn't work, she walked around to the other side and tried from a different angle. Still no success. Then she did something unexpected. She went to her food bowl, picked up a single piece of kibble in her mouth, carried it back to the bookshelf, and dropped it in front of the gap. "What is she?" Cerise began. Leora tapped the kibble with her paw, sending it rolling under the bookshelf. There was a soft click as it hit the toy mouse. Then she reached under from her original position and pulled out both the mouse and the kibble. "She problem-solved," Ansel said quietly. "She used a tool. That's supposed to be rare in cats." Which tells us something important. Ansel watched as Leora carried the mouse back to the center of the room and resumed playing. "She's smart enough to adapt. We just have to be smart enough to help her do it." But intelligence didn't solve every problem. The real test came with the first major snowstorm, predicted to dump 8 inches overnight with high winds and temperatures dropping to 15 degrees. The HOA sent out an emergency notification. All residents should prepare for possible power outages, keep flashlights accessible, have bottled water ready, consider staying with friends or family if you have medical equipment that requires electricity. Ansel and Cerise looked at each other over the email, the same thought occurring to both simultaneously. "The heated mat," Cerise said. "Needs electricity," Ansel finished. If the power went out, Leora would lose her warm spot. In 15-degree weather, with wind chill making it feel even colder, that could be dangerous. "We need backup heat," Cerise said. "Something that doesn't require power." They spent the next 2 hours searching online for solutions. Hand warmers were too inconsistent and had to be replaced every few hours. Candles were a fire hazard. Traditional hot water bottles would cool down too quickly. Finally, Ansel found something that might work. Thermal emergency blankets, the kind designed for disaster preparedness. They reflected body heat without requiring any power source. NASA technology, originally developed for space travel, now available in the camping section of outdoor stores. He bought 4 of them, along with a heavy-duty pet carrier lined with fleece. If the power went out, they'd wrap Leora in the emergency blankets and keep her in the carrier, where her own body heat would be reflected back to her. "That's our disaster plan for a cat," Cerise said, looking at their assembled supplies. "Most people don't have disaster plans for themselves. Most people don't have a half-deaf cat they're trying to sneak past an HOA," Ansel replied. The storm hit on a Friday night. The wind screamed around the building's corners, and snow piled up against windows in growing drifts. The power flickered twice, held, flickered again. Ansel and Cerise sat in the living room with the carrier open and ready, the emergency blankets within arm's reach. Leora, seemingly unconcerned, was curled up on her heated mat, purring softly. "She doesn't know how close this is," Cerise said quietly. "Maybe that's better," Ansel said. "Why should she worry?" The power held. The storm passed. By morning, the subdivision was transformed into a Christmas card scene, everything draped in white, tree branches bending under the weight. But they'd learned something important. Keeping Leora safe required constant vigilance and backup plans for their backup plans. Every comfort they provided came with a corresponding vulnerability. Every solution created new problems to anticipate, and winter was just beginning. The snow continued through December, not in dramatic storms but in persistent accumulation. The subdivision took on that particular quality of a place in winter, where everything moved slower and people hurried from warm car to warm building without lingering. Ansel maintained his routine despite the weather: morning coffee while reading the news, afternoon walk with Olaf through the ploughed pathways, evening return from his part-time work at the hardware store. Cerise kept her pattern too. Early morning visit, lunch break check-in, after-work playtime. Leora observed it all with her careful attention, learning the rhythms of her new household. She'd learned that Olaf's food bowl was off-limits, even though he ate slowly and often left kibble behind. She'd learned that Ansel kept his bedroom door open at night, but his office door closed during the day. She'd learned that certain sounds meant certain outcomes. Keys jangling meant someone was leaving. The coffee maker gurgling meant morning was starting. Olaf's tags clinking meant he was moving toward his water bowl. But the most important learning came by accident, or perhaps by that particular instinct cats have for finding patterns in chaos. It happened on a Tuesday evening, ordinary in every way. Ansel had returned from work, fed Olaf, and settled into his recliner with a weary sigh. The television came on automatically at 6:30, time to catch the local news broadcast. The familiar opening music played, a synthesized jingle, 3 notes ascending, followed by the announcer's voice. "Good evening, I'm Patricia Chen. Here's your first alert weather forecast." Leora, who'd been grooming herself on the heated mat, suddenly stopped. Her ears swiveled toward the television. For a long moment, she simply listened. Then she stood up, crossed the room with purposeful steps, jumped onto the arm of Ansel's recliner and pressed her face against his knee. The gesture was so deliberate, so specific, that Ansel froze. "Hey there," he said softly. "What's this about?" Leora pushed harder against his knee, then looked up at him with her odd, asymmetrical gaze. She was asking for something, that much was clear, but what? Ansel carefully reached down and stroked the side of her face with one finger, the way Cerise had shown him. Leora's eyes half closed, and she leaned into the touch. The purring started, that rough engine sound that still seemed surprised at its own existence. They stayed like that through the entire weather forecast. When the news transitioned to sports coverage, Leora jumped down, returned to her heated mat, and resumed grooming as if nothing unusual had happened. The next evening, the same thing occurred. 6:30 news, weather forecast jingle, Leora appearing at Ansel's knee. This time he was ready with the gentle stroking motion. She stayed for exactly the length of the forecast, then left. By the 3rd evening, Ansel was certain it was a pattern. By the 4th evening, he'd texted Cerise to come observe. She arrived just before 6:30, quiet and curious. They waited. The news came on. The weather jingle played. And Leora, right on cue, jumped onto the chair arm and pressed against Ansel's knee. "It's the sound," Cerise whispered. "She's responding to the jingle." "But why?" Ansel kept stroking Leora's face gently. What's special about that specific sound? They discussed it after Leora had returned to her mat, working through the possibilities like a puzzle. The jingle was the same every evening, 3 notes that never varied. For a cat with asymmetrical hearing, consistency would be valuable. The sound came at the same time from the same source, followed by the same visual images of weather maps on the screen. "She's created a routine," Cerise said slowly. "Or we created it for her and she claimed it. It's an anchor point," Ansel added, "something she can count on when everything else is unpredictable." The realization felt significant. If Leora needed predictability, they could provide it. If she responded to consistent patterns, they could build more of them into her days. Cerise started coming over specifically for the weather forecast. She'd arrive at 6:20, giving herself time to settle in. When the jingle played, she'd sit on the floor next to Ansel's chair and Leora would divide her attention between them, rubbing against both sets of hands. The ritual expanded naturally. Cerise brought the brush she used during her after-work visits and started incorporating it into the evening routine. Leora accepted the grooming during the forecast, the gentle strokes coinciding with the petting, the whole experience becoming a bundle of predictable, pleasant sensations. "We've created a ceremony," Cerise observed one evening. "It's almost religious in its consistency." "Cats like rituals," Ansel said, "but this is more than that. She's training us as much as we're training her." It was true. Both of them now planned their evenings around the 6:30 news. If Ansel had to work late, he felt guilty. If Cerise got stuck in traffic, she texted anxious updates. They'd become servants to a schedule set by a cat responding to a television jingle. But the benefits were undeniable. Leora's overall anxiety decreased noticeably. She moved through the apartment with more confidence, spent less time hiding behind the bookshelf, played more enthusiastically with her toys. The evening ritual seemed to organize her entire day, giving her a dependable touchstone that everything else could arrange itself around. The HOA noticed too, in their way. Or rather, they didn't notice, which was the goal. The building manager, an efficient woman named Mrs. Holbrook, did quarterly inspections of common areas and random spot checks of individual units. She'd been by twice since winter started, checking for space heater violations and making sure no one was storing gasoline in their apartments. She'd seen Leora both times. "Nice cat," she'd commented neutrally. "Quiet. Doesn't seem to bother the dog." "They get along well," Ansel had replied carefully. "Registered with the HOA? Working on the paperwork." Not entirely untrue. They were gathering documentation for another screen application attempt. Mrs. Holbrook had made a note on her clipboard, but said nothing else. The inspection continued without incident. Later, comparing notes, Cerise and Ansel realized what had happened. Mrs. Holbrook had noticed a calm cat, a clean apartment and no complaints from neighbors. In the hierarchy of HOA concerns, that registered as not a problem, and therefore not worth addressing right now. "We're succeeding by being boring," Cerise said. "Exactly," Ansel agreed. "The most effective strategy against bureaucracy is to be too unremarkable to bother with. But boring required constant maintenance. The litter box needed scooping twice a day to prevent any smell that might trigger complaints. Leora's food and water bowls were kept in the kitchen, out of sight of the main entrance. The heated mats cord was hidden behind furniture, creating the illusion that the cat just happened to like that spot, rather than requiring special equipment. They were performing normalcy, making Leora's presence seem effortless when it actually required detailed choreography. The ritual itself became proof of concept. During a casual conversation with a neighbor named Marcia Templeton, Cerise mentioned the evening routine. "Every night at 6:30, she said, keeping her tone light. "Like clockwork. She comes for pets during the weather forecast, then goes back to her own space, doesn't bother anyone, doesn't make noise." Marcia, who served on the HOA Architectural Committee, filed that information away. Predictable animals were acceptable animals. Animals that fit into human schedules without disruption were almost invisible. The strategy was working, but strategies have costs, and this one was accumulating them steadily. The daily visits meant Cerise was spending less time on her own life, less time with her own friends, less energy for her own interests. She'd stopped attending her monthly book club. She'd declined 3 separate invitations to dinner parties. Her apartment showed signs of neglect. Mail piling up, dishes in the sink, dust on surfaces she used to keep pristine. Ansel noticed. "You're spending more time here than at your own place." "I know," Cerise said. "But if I don't maintain the routine, she gets anxious. You see how she is." "I see how you are," Ansel replied. "You're exhausted." "I'm fine." "You're running yourself down." His voice was gentle but firm. "This isn't sustainable." Cerise didn't answer immediately. She just sat on the floor, brushing Leora with slow, methodical strokes, her own tiredness visible in the droop of her shoulders. "What's the alternative?" she finally asked. "Give up?" "No," Ansel said. "Adapt again. Find a way to maintain what she needs without destroying what you need." The question hung between them, unanswered and urgent. How do you care for something without losing yourself in the process? Outside, snow continued to fall, and the evening news played its familiar jingle, and Leora pressed against warm human hands. unaware of the complicated mathematics of love and exhaustion being calculated above her head. January brought a cold that seemed to come from the earth itself, the kind of deep freeze that made car engines reluctant and pipes vulnerable. The subdivision maintenance crews worked overtime, salting pathways and checking for ice dams on roofs. The HOA newsletter, arriving via email on the first Monday of the month, contained its usual mix of committee meeting minutes and architectural violation notices. But buried in the middle was something new. Announcement of a comprehensive building inspection scheduled for late January, with emphasis on identifying unauthorized modifications and safety hazards. Ansel read the notice 3 times, each reading making his stomach sink further. "They're being thorough this year," he told Cerise over the phone. "Every unit. Checking electrical, plumbing, structural modifications, looking for anything that violates building codes or HOA regulations. The heated mat," Cerise said immediately, "and Leora herself, if they do a detailed inspection, they'll document everything," Ansel finished, "and then we'll be officially in violation instead of flying under the radar." They'd been so focused on day-to-day survival that they'd stopped thinking about the larger bureaucratic framework. The casual invisibility they'd cultivated could disappear the moment someone wrote Leora's presence into an official report. "We could hide her for the day," Cerise suggested. "Take her to my apartment during the inspection." "Your lease doesn't allow pets," Ansel reminded her. "And what if they do a follow-up inspection? Random checks. We can't hide her forever." "So what do we do?" Ansel was quiet for a long moment. "We go on the offensive. We create the documentation they need before they create it for us." The plan was ambitious and specific. Instead of waiting for the inspection to find problems, they would proactively address every potential violation. They'd demonstrate that Leora's presence wasn't a liability, but an example of responsible pet ownership that exceeded HOA standards. First, they needed official veterinary documentation. Cerise made an appointment with the local clinic for a comprehensive wellness exam. The cost was higher than she'd hoped. $85 for the exam alone, plus vaccination updates, plus a health certificate suitable for HOA submission. The appointment itself was revealing. Dr. Levin, a patient woman in her 40s, examined Leora with gentle thoroughness. "She's in excellent condition," Dr. Levin said, making notes in the chart. "Weight is perfect, coat is healthy, no signs of parasites or illness." She paused, peering into Leora's left ear. "This ear has some scarring in the canal. Old injury, maybe from infection or trauma. It's limiting her hearing on this side significantly." "We suspected," Cerise said. "She always turns her right ear toward sounds." "Smart adaptation," Dr. Levin said. "She's compensating well. Does she seem anxious or disoriented?" "She was at first," Cerise explained. "But she's developed routines, patterns she can predict." Dr. Levin smiled. "Good instincts on your part. Cats with partial hearing loss do better with consistent environments. You're giving her exactly what she needs." The validation felt like a small victory, but it came with a price tag. $243 total by the time all the services were completed. Cerise paid with her credit card and tried not to calculate how many shifts she'd need to work to balance it out. But they had official documentation now, signed by a licensed veterinarian, stating that Leora was healthy, vaccinated, and well cared for. It was armor against accusations of neglect or irresponsibility. Next came the heated mat. Ansel researched electrical safety standards, wanting to prove that the device wasn't a fire hazard or building code violation. He discovered that the mat drew less power than a standard laptop charger and was UL certified for continuous operation. He documented everything with photographs showing the mat's placement, the protected cord routing, the automatic shutoff features. He printed out the manufacturer's specifications and safety certifications. By the time he was done, he had a presentation folder that would satisfy a building inspector or a paranoid fire marshal. The litter box location, the food storage, the water bowl placement, all of it was photographed and documented. They created a binder showing Leora's daily care routine, the products they used, and the measures they'd taken to prevent any impact on other residents. "We're building a legal defense for a cat's right to exist," Cerise observed, looking at their assembled materials. "We're building proof that we're better residents because of her," Ansel corrected. "That's the argument that actually works." They practiced their presentation with each other, timing it to under 5 minutes. The key points were simple. Leora was healthy and registered with a veterinarian. She didn't cause noise complaints or property damage. Her care equipment met all safety standards. Her presence actually demonstrated the kind of responsible, organized household management that HOAs supposedly valued. But all the preparation in the world couldn't eliminate the nervousness that came with the actual inspection day. Mrs. Holbrook arrived at 9:15 with a clipboard and a maintenance contractor named Frank who specialized in electrical systems. They were professional and efficient, moving through the apartment with practiced speed. Frank checked the outlets, tested the circuit breakers, examined the heated mat's power draw with a multimeter. "This thing is barely registering," he said. "Less wattage than a phone charger." "It's designed for veterinary use," Ansel explained, offering the documentation folder. "Temperature-controlled automatic shutoff, UL listed." Frank glanced at the paperwork, nodded, made a note on his inspection form. "No issues here." Mrs. Holbrook was more interested in Leora herself. The cat, following her evening ritual pattern even though it was morning, had jumped onto Ansel's chair arm the moment he sat down, seeking the familiar comfort of the routine. "She seems very settled," Mrs. Holbrook observed. "She is," Cerise said carefully. "We've worked hard to make sure she integrates well with the household and doesn't disturb anyone." "No complaints from neighbors?" "None." "No damage to the apartment?" "None. Everything is in the same condition as when I moved in. Better, actually." Ansel gestured around the apartment, which they'd spent the previous day deep cleaning. Mrs. Holbrook made several notes. "The official HOA policy requires approved window screens for cats." "We've applied twice," Cerise said, pulling out the rejection letters. "We're prepared to apply again. In the meantime, Leora is never left unsupervised near windows. We've installed temporary barriers that exceed safety requirements." She showed photos of the window guards they'd purchased. Temporary barriers designed for child safety, but perfect for preventing a cat from accessing any dangerous opening. Mrs. Holbrook examined the photos, then walked to the window to see the actual installation. The guards were unobtrusive, almost invisible, unless you were looking for them specifically. "These weren't here during the last inspection," she said. "We installed them in December," Ansel confirmed. "We're constantly updating our safety measures." The inspection continued for another 20 minutes. Frank checked the plumbing, examined the heater vents, tested the smoke detectors. Mrs. Holbrook documented everything with her phone camera, her expression neutral throughout. Finally, they were done. Mrs. Holbrook reviewed her notes, consulted with Frank, then turned to face Ansel and Cerise with an expression that revealed nothing. "Officially," she said, "you're still in violation of HOA pet policies without approved screens. However," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "I'm noting in my report that you've demonstrated exceptional responsibility in managing this situation. The temporary safety measures are adequate. The animal shows no signs of being a nuisance or hazard." "What does that mean?" Cerise asked. "It means," Mrs. Holbrook said, "that I'm recommending the Architectural Committee grant a provisional exception to the screen requirement, 3-month trial period. They'll want documented proof that the current setup remains safe and doesn't generate complaints. If you can maintain that standard, the exception becomes permanent." The relief was so intense that Cerise actually felt dizzy. "Thank you," she managed. "Don't thank me yet," Mrs. Holbrook said. "The committee can still reject my recommendation, but they usually follow my assessments on safety issues." She gathered her paperwork. "Keep doing what you're doing. Document everything. Be the model for how responsible pet ownership should look." After they left, Ansel and Cerise sat in stunned silence for several minutes. "We did it," Cerise finally said. "We survived the inspection," Ansel corrected. "Now we have to survive the 3-month trial." But even that caution couldn't completely dampen the victory. They'd faced the biggest threat to Leora's security and emerged with a path forward, not guaranteed but possible. Leora, unaware of the bureaucratic drama that had just unfolded around her, jumped down from the chair and walked to her food bowl. She ate 3 pieces of kibble, drank some water, then returned to her heated mat, where she began grooming herself with calm concentration. Just another morning in her routine, no different from any other. Except everything was different. The walls of the apartment felt more solid somehow, the safety more real. They'd bought themselves time to figure out the next steps. The question now wasn't whether Leora could stay, but how to make that stay permanent. February arrived with a false warmth, one of those winter tricks where the sun shines bright and the temperature creeps above freezing, making everyone believe spring might come early. It never did, but the brief relief was welcome anyway. The subdivision's community center, a modest building near the entrance that hosted HOA meetings and the occasional yoga class, posted a new announcement on its bulletin board. Reading Paws program, volunteers needed. Tilda Corvin noticed it first. She was a woman in her late 70s who lived alone in a ground-floor unit with a white Persian cat named Auric. She'd been part of the neighborhood longer than anyone, watching as younger families moved in and the HOA regulations multiplied. She also happened to be on the architectural committee that would decide Leora's fate. Tilda read the announcement carefully, then made a phone call. "Cerise, it's Tilda Corvin from Unit 142. I saw your name on the contact list for that cat you're caring for. Do you have a moment?" Cerise's heart rate jumped. A call from an architectural committee member could only mean one thing. A decision was coming. "Of course," she said, keeping her voice steady. "What can I help you with?" "I wanted to ask about your cat's temperament," Tilda said. "Is she tolerant of children?" The question was so unexpected that Cerise had to pause. "Yes, actually. She's very calm." "Why do you ask?" "The community center is starting a reading program," Tilda explained. "Children who struggle with reading come and read aloud to therapy animals. The animals provide a non-judgmental audience, which helps anxious kids relax and practice." "That sounds wonderful," Cerise said, still confused about why this involved Leora. "Auric is registered as a therapy cat," Tilda continued. "I've been bringing him to the library for 3 years, but he's getting older, and I can't commit to every session anymore. The program needs more volunteers." She paused. "I thought your cat might be a good candidate." The implication settled slowly. Tilda was offering an opportunity for Leora to become visible in a positive way, to be seen as an asset to the community, rather than a violation to be managed. "She'd need to be certified," Cerise said. "The organization that runs the program does the evaluation. Basic temperament test, health screening. If she passes, she'd be registered. Then you could bring her to sessions whenever you're available." Would this affect the architectural committee's decision about her status?" Tilda was quiet for a moment. "I can't speak for the whole committee, but I can tell you that we look favorably on residents who contribute to community programs, and we're more inclined to make exceptions for animals that provide documented benefits." It was as close to a promise as Tilda could ethically make. Cerise understood what she was being offered, a chance to turn Leora from a bureaucratic problem into a community resource. "I'll look into the certification process," Cerise said. "Good," Tilda replied. "And Cerise, the evaluation is next weekend. I already told them you might be coming. Bring your documentation from Dr. Levin." The line went dead before Cerise could respond. She called Ansel immediately, explaining the conversation. He listened without interrupting, processing the strategic implications. "It's smart," he said finally. "If Leora becomes part of an official community program, the HOA would have to explain why they're rejecting a therapy animal. That's much harder to justify than rejecting a random pet." "But she has to pass the evaluation," Cerise said. "What if she doesn't?" "Then we're in the same position we're in now," Ansel pointed out. "This is only upside. We need to try." The evaluation took place on Saturday morning at the community center. The evaluator, a woman named Judith who'd been working with therapy animals for 20 years, was thorough and professional. She tested Leora's reaction to sudden noises, unexpected touches, food being offered and withdrawn. She introduced a small loud dog to see how Leora handled stress. She observed how Leora interacted with Judith herself, looking for signs of aggression or excessive fear. Leora passed everything with calm indifference. The loud dog didn't faze her. She simply watched it with mild interest. The sudden noises made her ears swivel, but didn't provoke flight. The unexpected touches were tolerated with the patient resignation of a cat who'd learned that humans sometimes did weird things. "She's very steady," Judith said, making notes. "That's exactly what we need. Some cats are too playful for this work, too easily distracted, but she's focused, calm." She looked up at Cerise. "Does she have any health issues I should know about?" "Partial hearing loss in her left ear," Cerise said. "She compensates well, but she does better when approached from her right side." Judith made a note. "That's actually fine. We always instruct the children about proper approach anyway. This just gives them extra practice being mindful." The certification was approved on the spot. Leora was now officially registered as a therapy animal with the Reading Paws program, allowed to work in school libraries, community centers, and public spaces. The first session is next Sunday, Judith said, handing over the paperwork. 2 p.m. at the community center. We'll have 3 or 4 kids, each gets 15 minutes with the cat. You just sit quietly, keep her calm, let the children read. The first session was surreal. Cerise arrived early, setting up in a quiet corner of the community center with Leora's carrier and a soft blanket. She didn't know what to expect. Chaos, noise, children who'd be too rough or too loud. Instead, the children who arrived were quiet and nervous. The program coordinator, a young teacher named Marcus, explained that these were students who struggled with reading confidence, kids who got anxious when asked to read aloud in class. The first child was a boy about 8 years old named Tyler. He clutched a picture book about dinosaurs with visible anxiety. "This is Leora," Marcus said gently. "She loves being read to. You don't have to rush. She's just happy to have company." Tyler sat down cross-legged on the floor, the book in his lap, Leora about 2 feet away on her blanket. He opened the book and started reading in a halting, uncertain voice. "In the Cretaceous period, dinosaurs ruled the earth." Leora watched him with her steady gaze, making no sudden movements. After a few sentences, Tyler's voice grew slightly more confident. By the second page, he was reading more smoothly, his attention split between the book and the cat. Halfway through the session, Leora did something unexpected. She stood up, walked over to Tyler, and sat down next to his leg. Then she started purring. Tyler's face transformed. The anxiety melted away, replaced by wonder. He reached out carefully, petting Leora's head with gentle strokes, and continued reading with new energy. "She likes you," Cerise said softly. "She really likes the story," Tyler said seriously. 15 minutes passed like 5. When Marcus quietly indicated time was up, Tyler looked genuinely disappointed. "Can I come back next week?" he asked. "We'd love to have you," Marcus said. The pattern repeated with each child. Shy kids, anxious kids, children who found reading terrifying in a classroom but manageable with a calm cat as their only audience. Leora adjusted to each one, sometimes staying on her blanket, sometimes moving closer, always purring at exactly the right moments. By the end of the 2-hour session, 4 children had read to her, 4 small victories in confidence, facilitated by a small cat who simply showed up and paid attention. Marcus pulled Cerise aside afterward. "She's perfect for this. I've worked with a lot of therapy animals. Some are too energetic, want to play instead of listening. Others are too nervous, pick up on the kid's anxiety and reflect it back. But Leora, she's got this quality. Like she understands exactly what these kids need. She reads situations well," Cerise said. It was the best explanation she had for something that felt almost uncanny. The program became part of their routine. Every Sunday at 2 p.m., Cerise would pack Leora's carrier and drive to the community center. The sessions were always the same structure but never exactly alike, each child bringing their own books and anxieties. Leora handled all of it with patient grace. A boy who read in whispers, a girl who cried while reading a sad picture book, then hugged Leora while apologizing. A child who had autism and couldn't make eye contact with humans but stared directly at Leora while working through a chapter book, page by laborious page. Word spread. Marcus asked if they could add a second Sunday session. Then a local elementary school requested a special visit for their reading intervention class. The local newspaper did a feature story on the Reading Paws program with a photo of Tyler reading to Leora under the headline, "Confidence Through Compassion." The photo appeared in the community center newsletter. It appeared on the HOA's website. It appeared on the local library's bulletin board. Tilda sent Cerise a text message 3 weeks into the program. "Committee meeting next Thursday. Good news coming." The architectural committee's decision arrived via official letter on Friday. Cerise opened it with shaking hands, Ansel reading over her shoulder. "Dear Ms. Bloom, the architectural committee has reviewed your petition regarding the cat identified as Leora. Given the animal's certification as a therapy cat and participation in community programs, the committee has voted to grant a permanent exception to the window screen requirement, contingent upon 1. Maintenance of current safety measures, 2. Continued participation in approved community programs, 3. Zero substantiated complaints from other residents, The list of conditions went on, but Cerise stopped reading after permanent exception. "We won," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Leora won," Ansel corrected. "She proved her value." That Sunday, after the reading session, Tyler's mother approached Cerise in the parking lot. "I wanted to thank you," the woman said. "Tyler has been struggling with reading since kindergarten. Tutors, special programs, nothing worked. He'd get so anxious he'd freeze up." She paused, her eyes bright. "But after that first session with your cat, he came home and read to his stuffed animals for an hour. Now he reads every night. He says he's practicing for Leora." "She just sits there," Cerise said, deflecting the praise. "She shows up," Tyler's mother corrected. "She's consistent. She doesn't judge. For a kid like Tyler, that's everything." Driving home, Cerise thought about that phrase. She shows up. Such a simple description of such a complicated achievement. Leora showed up because Cerise and Ansel had spent months creating the conditions that made showing up possible. The unscented litter, the heated mat, the evening ritual, the veterinary care, the documentation, the strategy. All of it, so that a small cat with a hearing problem could sit in a community center on Sunday afternoons and listen to children read. The victory wasn't dramatic. No one would write headlines about their struggle with the HOA or the careful accumulation of proof that Leora deserved to stay. But it was real, earned through patience and attention to detail, and it opened the door for what came next. Spring arrived in increments so small they were almost invisible. The snow receded from the sunny spots first, leaving muddy patches in the subdivision's landscaping. The maintenance crews switched from shoveling to sweeping, clearing away winter's accumulated grit and salt. People started opening windows again, letting in air that didn't feel like it came from some frozen place deep in the earth. Ansel's lease renewal notice arrived in mid-March, and with it a rent increase that made him wince. 12% higher than last year, justified by market conditions and building improvements that he'd never noticed. He did the math sitting at his kitchen table, calculator and budget spreadsheet open on his laptop. The increase would cost him an additional $200 per month, nearly $2,500 over the next year. Money he didn't really have, not with the extra expenses Leora had added to his monthly budget. Cerise found him there when she arrived for the evening ritual, staring at numbers with a discouraged expression. "What's wrong?" she asked. He showed her the renewal notice. "I can afford it technically, but it means cutting other things. No more building up savings, no buffer for emergencies." "Have you looked at other places?" Cerise asked. "Not seriously. Moving is expensive, and I'd need first month, last month security deposit, plus the hassle of finding something that allows pets, specifically a cat." He gestured at Leora, who was waiting patiently by his chair for the evening news to start. "We're finally settled here. The HOA approved her. She's got her reading program. Starting over somewhere else means rebuilding all of that." But Cerise was looking at the notice with a different expression, something calculating. "What if starting over meant starting better?" she said slowly. "Meaning? Meaning, what if there's a place that's actually designed for people with pets, where you don't have to fight for approval or worry about surprise inspections, where Leora is welcomed instead of tolerated?" Ansel hadn't thought about it that way. He'd been so focused on defending Leora's right to exist in his current space that he'd stopped considering whether better options might exist elsewhere. They spent that evening researching, instead of watching the news, though they still marked the ritual time with petting and brushing. Ansel worked his laptop, while Cerise used her phone, both of them searching for pet-friendly apartments in the area. The results were mixed. Most places that allowed cats charged significant pet deposits, $200 to $400 non-refundable, plus an additional monthly pet rent that ranged from $25 to $50. Some had breed restrictions for dogs, but breed-agnostic size limits. No pets over 20 pounds, which would exclude Olaf. But then Cerise found something promising. "Look at this," she said, turning her phone to show him. "Riverside Commons. They advertise as pet-friendly community. Ground floor units with screened patios. No pet deposit, just a one-time admin fee of $50. Pet rent is only $15 a month." Ansel clicked through the website. The complex was about 10 minutes from his current location, older construction but well-maintained. The units were smaller than his current apartment, but the rent was nearly $300 less per month than his renewal would cost. "That's savings even with the pet rent," he said, doing quick math. And ground floor means no stairs for Olaf, Cerise added. Plus, look at the amenities. There's a fenced dog park, community room with activities. They host monthly social events. It sounded too good to be true, which meant careful investigation was necessary. They called the leasing office first thing Monday morning and arranged a tour for Wednesday afternoon. The complex was older than the photos suggested, built probably in the 80s, with that particular architectural style that prioritized function over aesthetics. But it was clean, the grounds were maintained, and when they walked through the available unit, Ansel could immediately see the advantages. The ground floor apartment had a sliding glass door that opened onto a small patio already screened in as advertised. The patio looked out onto a grassy common area where a few residents were walking dogs. The kitchen was smaller than his current one, but the bedroom was actually larger. There was a coat closet by the entrance, something his current place lacked. The screens are included, Cerise asked the leasing agent, a young man named Tom. All ground floor patios come with them, Tom confirmed. A lot of our residents have cats. The screens just make sense. What's the policy on pets? Ansel asked. Any restrictions beyond the admin fee and monthly rent? We require proof of vaccination and spay-neuter documentation. That's basically it. No weight limits, no breed restrictions. If your pet is current on shots and you clean up after them, we're happy. It was almost shocking in its simplicity. No committees, no architectural review, no provisional exceptions contingent on good behavior. Just basic, sensible requirements. When would this unit be available? Ansel asked. April 15th, Tom said. That's when the current lease ends. We could have you in by May 1st if you want it. Ansel and Cerise looked at each other. This was happening faster than either of them had anticipated. Can we think about it? Ansel asked. Sure, Tom said. But we've had a lot of interest in this unit specifically. Ground floor with patio is popular. I can hold it for 24 hours if you put down a holding deposit of $250. That would apply to your move-in costs if you decide to take it. They left with paperwork and a decision to make. It's a better situation, Cerise said as they sat in Ansel's car in the parking lot. Objectively, cheaper, pet-friendly, ground floor for Olav. You'd save money every month. But moving costs money up front, Ansel said. Application fee, holding deposit, first month's rent, admin fees, moving truck rental, utility deposits. He was running numbers in his head. I'm looking at close to $3,000 in expenses before I save a dime. I could help, Cerise offered. No, Ansel said firmly. You've already spent too much on Leora. Between the vet bills and supplies and gas money driving over here every day, this isn't your financial burden to carry. She's not a burden, Cerise said quietly. I know, but the costs are real, and I can't keep letting you absorb them. They sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment. What if we approach this differently? Cerise finally said. What if this is an investment in making the whole situation sustainable? Right now, you're barely keeping up with expenses. One emergency, one unexpected bill, and the whole structure collapses. But if you move here, you've got lower rent, which means more flexibility. That makes everything more stable. She was right, and Ansel knew it. But the gap between current state and future stability required crossing a financial chasm first. I'll need to pull from my emergency fund, he said, the one I've been trying not to touch. How much is in it? $4,000. I was saving for a new car eventually, or major repairs, or, he gestured vaguely, emergencies. This is an emergency, Cerise said. Just a slower one. Your rent is going up 12%. That's not sustainable long term, especially with Leora's expenses. Moving now, while you have the money to do it, is actually the responsible choice. Ansel wanted to argue, but the logic was sound. Sometimes the smart move required spending money to save money. It just felt risky and exposed. I need to see the unit one more time, he said, without the sales pitch. I need to walk through it and imagine actually living there. Tom agreed to let them back in that evening after hours. Ansel brought a measuring tape and notebook, calculating furniture placement and storage solutions. Cerise took photos of the kitchen layout and bathroom shelving. But mostly, Ansel just stood in the empty apartment, imagining the daily routines transplanted into this new space. The heated mat by the couch, the litter box in the bathroom, the evening news ritual in the living room, though the television would have to go on a different wall. Leora would have the patio, Cerise said, standing by the sliding glass door. She could watch birds, feel outside air, be safe. Ansel joined her at the door. The screened patio was small but adequate, maybe 6 feet deep by 8 feet wide, large enough for a chair and some potted plants, large enough for a cat to feel like she had outdoor access. "What about the reading program?" Ansel asked. "The community center is 15 minutes from here instead of 5. That changes the logistics." 15 minutes isn't far, Cerise said. "We'd still make it work." But would they accept the change of address? What if the HOA permission was tied to my specific unit? These were the details that complicated every decision, the interconnected dependencies that made change feel impossible. Cerise pulled out her phone and called Tilda Corvin, putting the call on speaker. "Tilda, it's Cerise. I have a question about the reading program. If Ansel moves to a different apartment complex, does that affect Leora's certification?" "Not at all," Tilda's voice came through clearly. "The certification is for the animal, not the address. As long as she's still local enough to attend sessions, nothing changes." "And her HOA approval?" "That was specific to Ansel's building, yes. But she won't need approval at a pet-friendly complex. That's actually better. No conditional exceptions, no monitoring. Just a normal pet in a normal apartment. So there's no bureaucratic reason not to move." "None that I can see," Tilda said. "Why is this happening?" "Maybe," Cerise said. "We're considering options." After the call ended, Ansel felt the decision settling into place with a weight that was almost physical. "Okay," he said. "Okay, let's do this." The next morning he called Tom and put down the holding deposit. The lease application was submitted by noon. By the end of the week he'd been approved, and the moving date was set for the last weekend of April. But approval and execution were different things. The logistics of moving began to accumulate like a second job, coordinating utilities, arranging for the moving truck, packing systematically while still living in the space, notifying everyone who needed to know the new address. And underneath all the practical tasks was the question neither of them had said out loud. What would Leora make of this disruption to her carefully constructed routines? The evening ritual continued at 6:30 every night, unchanged. But now, when Leora pressed against Ansel's knee during the weather forecast, he wondered if she sensed something shifting, some fundamental change coming that would test everything they'd built together. The weeks leading up to the move acquired a frantic quality that neither Ansel nor Cerise had fully anticipated. It wasn't just the logistics of packing and coordinating services. It was the careful dismantling of patterns that had taken months to establish, knowing they'd need to rebuild them all in a new location. Cerise researched moving strategies for anxious cats, reading forums and consulting with Dr. Levin during a checkup appointment. The advice was consistent. Maintain as much routine as possible. Minimize the cat's exposure to chaos. Introduce the new space gradually. "The carrier is key," Dr. Levin said. "If she associates it with safety, she'll use it as a refuge during stressful times. But if it only means vet visits and car rides, she'll resist it." They'd bought the carrier back in October, a sturdy, hard-sided model with good ventilation. It had been sitting in Ansel's bedroom, door open, since the day they'd brought it home. Occasionally, Leora would investigate it, sniffing at the interior, but she'd never voluntarily gone inside. "We need to make it appealing," Cerise said. "Associate it with positive things." They started a new routine. Each evening after the news and weather forecast, they'd place a treat inside the carrier, just one, unscented and small, positioned near the entrance. Leora would stretch her neck in to eat it, but wouldn't enter fully. After a week, they moved the treat further back. Leora had to put her front paws inside to reach it. She'd do it quickly, snatch the treat, and retreat immediately. 2 weeks in, the treat went all the way to the back. Leora hesitated the first time, wary of the enclosed space. But hunger and curiosity won. She stepped fully inside, ate the treat, and backed out carefully. "Progress," Ansel said quietly. They'd been watching from the kitchen, giving her space. They added a blanket to the carrier floor, one that smelled like the heated mat. They placed a toy mouse inside, one of Leora's favorites. They left the carrier door open all the time, letting it become part of the apartment's landscape instead of a threatening object that only appeared for bad experiences. By mid-April, Leora was spending time in the carrier voluntarily. She'd walk in, turn around, lie down on the blanket. Not for long, 5 or 10 minutes at most, but it was progress. "She's claiming it," Cerise observed, turning it into one of her safe spots. The packing process was strategic. They started with items Leora never interacted with: books, out-of-season clothes, kitchen equipment that rarely got used. The boxes accumulated in Ansel's bedroom with the door kept closed, keeping the disruption contained. The living room and main areas stayed normal as long as possible. The heated mat remained in place. The litter box stayed in its usual spot. The food and water bowls didn't move. Leora's daily life continued with minimal visible change, even as the apartment slowly transformed around the edges. But cats notice everything. Leora's behavior showed subtle shifts. She spent more time following Ansel from room to room, as if checking that he wasn't disappearing. She became more vocal, making those small chirping sounds when people moved in ways she couldn't predict. The evening ritual became even more important. 6:30 news, weather forecast jingle, her spot on the chair arm, gentle petting. It was the one constant in increasing chaos, and she clung to it with visible need. "She knows something's happening," Ansel said one night, after Leora had finally settled on her heated mat after an hour of restless patrolling. "Of course she knows," Cerise said. "We just need to get through the actual moving day. Once we're in the new place and can rebuild routines, she'll adjust." The actual moving day was planned with military precision. Cerise had taken the day off work. Ansel had rented a truck and recruited Davin Hoxley, the HVAC technician who'd helped with the heated mat installation, to assist with the heavy lifting. The plan was clear. Pack the truck with everything except Leora's essential items. Move Olav and Leora to the new apartment first. Set up their spaces before anything else. Create islands of familiar normalcy in the new location, then transport the rest of the belongings. It worked perfectly until the moment a neighbor's car backfired in the parking lot. The sound was sharp and sudden, a metallic crack that echoed off the buildings. In the past, that kind of noise would have sent Leora fleeing outside, seeking distance from a threat her limited hearing couldn't properly locate. But now, 6 months of routine and safety training kicked in. Instead of running for the door or hiding behind furniture, Leora ran directly to the carrier, dove inside and pressed herself into the back corner. Ansel and Cerise found her there, small and tense, but contained, safe. "Good girl," Cerise said softly, not approaching too close. "That's exactly what you're supposed to do." They'd been planning to move Leora in another hour, but this changed the timeline. She was already in the carrier, already in her safe space. If they moved her now, they could minimize the additional stress. "I'll take her," Cerise said. "You stay here and coordinate with Davin. I'll get her settled at the new place, then come back to help with the rest." Ansel carefully closed the carrier door, securing the latch. Leora made one small sound of protest, but didn't thrash or panic. She was scared but trusting, allowing herself to be contained because the container felt safer than the chaos outside. The drive to the new apartment took 12 minutes. Cerise drove slowly, taking turns carefully, keeping the carrier secured on the passenger seat where she could reach over and press her fingers against the ventilation holes. "You're okay," she said repeatedly. "Just a short ride. Almost there." At the new apartment, Cerise had already set up a safe room in the bathroom. She'd brought over supplies the day before. The litter box with familiar litter, food and water bowls, a cozy bed, and the heated mat already plugged in and warming. She carried the carrier inside and set it down in the bathroom, leaving the door open. Then she sat on the floor, waiting. After 5 long minutes, Leora emerged slowly. She sniffed the air, her ears swiveling to map the new sounds. Different traffic patterns, different building noises, different airflow. Everything was wrong and strange, but the litter box smelled right. The heated mat felt right. The water bowl was familiar. The food bowl was hers. Leora walked the perimeter of the small bathroom, investigating every corner. Then she used the litter box, drank some water, and retreated to the heated mat where she curled up tightly. "Good job," Cerise said quietly. "You're so brave." She stayed in the bathroom with Leora for another 30 minutes, just sitting quietly, offering her presence without demands. Gradually, Leora's body unclenched slightly. Not relaxed, not yet, but accepting. When Cerise finally left to help with the rest of the move, she left the bathroom door cracked open just a few inches. Not enough for Leora to escape into the larger, unknown apartment, but enough that she didn't feel completely trapped. The rest of the day passed in a blur of boxes and furniture and heavy lifting. Olav had been moved next, and he'd settled into the new living room with barely a reaction. New place, same couch, same food bowl. Dogs were simpler that way. By evening, the truck was unloaded and most of the essential furniture was in place. The apartment looked chaotic, Boxes everywhere, nothing organized. But the critical elements were established. Couch, bed, television, kitchen supplies. And Leora's safe room, still contained in the bathroom, still offering familiarity in foreign territory. "Should we let her out?" Ansel asked, looking at the cracked door. "Not tonight," Cerise said. "Let her adjust to that one room. Tomorrow we'll open it up and let her explore on her terms." They ordered pizza because neither of them had energy to cook, eating it sitting on the floor because the kitchen table wasn't assembled yet. The television was set up but not properly mounted, propped on a box at an angle. "We should test the news," Ansel said. "Make sure we can get the local station here." They found the channel easily. At 6:30, the familiar jingle played, the same 3 notes that had marked every evening for months. From the bathroom, they heard a small questioning meow. Cerise got up and opened the door wider. Leora stood just inside, staring at the sound's source with her head tilted. "It's still here," Ansel said to her. "The routine moved with us." Leora took one tentative step out of the bathroom, then another. She walked slowly into the living room, stopping every few feet to sniff and listen. When she reached the couch, she jumped up onto the arm, the same position she always took, but Ansel wasn't in his chair because the chair wasn't assembled yet. He was on the floor, leaning against the couch. Leora adjusted. She jumped down from the arm and onto Ansel's lap, something she'd never done before. Then she pressed her face against his knee, just like always. "Well," Cerise said, her throat tight, "I guess we're home." The weather forecast played, showing a different map with different cities, but the format was identical. Sunny tomorrow, warming trend into the weekend, slight chance of rain on Tuesday. Leora stayed in Ansel's lap through the entire forecast, purring that rough, rusty sound. When the segment ended and transitioned to sports coverage, she jumped down, walked back to the bathroom, and returned to her heated mat. "She did it," Ansel said quietly. "She trusted us enough to follow the routine, even when everything else changed." "No," Cerise corrected. "We did it. We built something strong enough to survive being moved." But the work wasn't done. The next few days would test that strength repeatedly, as Leora explored the new apartment, adjusted to new sounds and smells, learned new safe spots and danger zones. The question hanging over everything: had they truly rebuilt home, or just temporarily displaced the anxiety? The morning after the move, Ansel woke on an air mattress surrounded by boxes, his back aching and his mind already compiling a list of tasks. But his first thought was for Leora, still contained in the bathroom. He found Cerise already there, sitting on the bathroom floor with the door fully open now. Leora was on her lap, accepting gentle strokes, while watching the hallway beyond with intense focus. "She's ready to explore," Cerise said quietly, "but she's nervous." "Then we go slow," Ansel replied. "Let her set the pace." They moved to the living room and resumed unpacking, deliberately creating calm activity that Leora could observe from safety. After 20 minutes, she appeared in the bathroom doorway, small and wary. She took a single step into the hallway, paused, sniffed. Her right ear swiveled, catching the sounds of boxes being opened and items being placed. Normal human activity, unthreatening. Another step, another pause. It took her 15 minutes to cross the 20 feet from the bathroom to the living room. Once there, she immediately retreated behind the couch, finding the gap between it and the wall that would become her new primary hiding spot. "That's fine," Ansel said, not looking at her directly. "Take your time." Over the next few hours, Leora made several careful expeditions. She'd emerge from behind the couch, cross to investigate a new area, then retreat back to safety. Each journey took her a little further. The kitchen with its unfamiliar layout, the bedroom with its strange closet configuration, the front door area with its new sounds from the building hallway. The patio was the breakthrough moment. Cerise opened the sliding glass door to air out the apartment, and the screened patio filled with spring breeze. Leora's nose lifted immediately, catching the scent of grass and outside air. She approached the open door cautiously, stopping at the threshold. The screen was different from a window, more permeable, letting sounds and smells through in a way that windows didn't. She could hear birds singing in nearby trees, could smell earth and mulch from the flower beds along the building foundation. One paw reached out, testing the patio floor, then another. Suddenly, she was outside but still enclosed, surrounded by screen on all sides. She walked the perimeter slowly, pressing her nose against the screen mesh, whiskers brushing the barrier. When she reached the corner where two screen walls met, she sat down and simply watched the world beyond. Grass, sidewalks, other residents walking dogs, cars passing on the street. "She's got her window," Ansel said, watching from inside. "Just a bigger one." By the end of the first week, Leora had claimed the patio as her domain. She'd spend hours there, tracking birds and squirrels, watching human activity, occasionally batting at insects that landed on the screen mesh. It became her new favorite spot, surpassing even the heated mat for total daily time invested. The apartment building itself offered different social dynamics than Ansel's previous place. At the old subdivision, neighbors were distant and formal, connected only through HOA meetings and violation notices. Here, the residents were more casual, nodding greetings in the parking lot, chatting at the mailboxes. Ansel's immediate neighbor was a college student named James, who kept irregular hours and played guitar at odd times. The neighbor on the other side was a retired couple, the Matsudas, who had two small dogs that yapped whenever anyone walked past their door. Within days, people had noticed Leora on the patio. "That's a pretty cat," Mrs. Matsuda commented one morning when Ansel was leaving for work. "Very calm. Our dogs would love to meet her." "She's nervous around dogs," Ansel said carefully. "But thank you." "Maybe she'd like our birds," Mr. Matsuda suggested. "We have finches in the bedroom. Sometimes we put their cage outside on nice days." "She'd probably enjoy watching them," Ansel agreed, seeing the gesture for what it was. Neighborly inclusion, the assumption that a pet owner would appreciate pet-related activities. The casual acceptance was startling after months of bureaucratic resistance. Here, having a cat was normal, unremarkable. No architectural review necessary, no provisional exceptions, no committee votes. Leora simply existed, and that was fine. But normalcy brought its own challenges. The community room that Tom had mentioned during the tour hosted monthly pet social hours, and James had mentioned it the second week they'd lived there. "You should bring your cat," James had said. "They usually get 10 or 12 people. Everyone brings their pets, there's snacks, it's pretty chill." The idea of bringing Leora to a room full of strange animals and people made Ansel's anxiety spike, but Cerise was curious. "It could be good socialization," she said. "She's comfortable in the reading program now. Maybe she's ready for more varied interactions." They attended the next session cautiously, keeping Leora in her carrier initially, planning to assess before committing to full participation. The community room was spacious and well lit, with about 15 residents and their pets distributed around the space. Most were dogs, a few cats in carriers or on leashes. The energy was relaxed, people chatting while animals investigated each other with varying degrees of interest. Ansel found a quiet corner and set the carrier down, door still closed. Leora watched through the ventilation holes, her body tense. "Maybe this was too much," Cerise said quietly. But then something unexpected happened. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, approached slowly. She was holding a picture book. "Is that the reading cat?" she asked, her voice hushed with something like awe. Ansel blinked, confused. "Excuse me?" "From the library program. Leora, right? I read to her last month. She helped me finish my book." The recognition was stunning. This child, in this completely different context, had recognized Leora and remembered her. "Yes," Cerise said, finding her voice. "This is Leora. Can I say hi?" the girl asked. "If she wants to come out," Cerise said, "but we have to let her decide." They opened the carrier door slowly. Leora peered out, assessing. The room was loud, chaotic, full of stimulation that could be overwhelming, but there, directly in front of her, was a small human sitting quietly with a book, familiar context in unfamiliar territory. Leora stepped out cautiously and walked directly to the girl, who remained perfectly still. Leora sniffed her hands, then sat down next to her leg, exactly the way she did during reading sessions. "She remembers you," Ansel said, amazed. The girl beamed. She opened her book and began reading aloud, right there in the middle of the pet social, her voice steady and confident. Other residents noticed, forming a small audience around this impromptu performance. For 15 minutes, the pet social became a reading session. The girl read while Leora sat attentively, and a handful of other children joined in, taking turns with their own books. "She's famous," James said, grinning. "You've got a celebrity cat." After the event, several residents approached Ansel and Cerise with questions. Was Leora certified? Could she visit other places? Would she come to the elementary school's end-of-year reading celebration? The requests snowballed. Suddenly, Leora wasn't just the cat they'd fought to keep. She was becoming a community resource, something people wanted access to. "This is different from the subdivision," Cerise said on the drive home. "There, we had to prove she deserved to exist. Here, people are assuming she's valuable and asking how they can participate." "Culture matters," Ansel said. "The HOA created a culture of restrictions and suspicion. This complex has a culture of inclusion. Same cat, completely different reception, but increased visibility brought renewed pressure. Leora couldn't just exist quietly anymore. She was being invited places, expected to perform her therapy work, counted on to show up and be consistent. "What if she gets stressed?" Cerise worried aloud. "What if we're pushing her too hard?" "We watch her closely," Ansel said. "Same as always. The moment she shows signs of being overwhelmed, we pull back. Her well-being comes first." They developed new assessment criteria, observing Leora's behavior before and after each public appearance. If she came home and immediately retreated to the bathroom, that meant the event was too stressful. If she returned and went to her patio to watch birds, that meant she was coping well. If she sought out human contact afterward, pressing against knees and purring, that meant she'd actively enjoyed it. The pattern became clear over multiple events. Leora thrived in quiet, structured settings with children, but struggled in chaotic, multi-animal environments. Reading sessions, library visits, small classroom appearances were manageable. Large pet socials, dog-heavy events, unpredictable gatherings were too much. They started declining certain invitations, being selective about which requests they accepted. Some residents were disappointed, but most understood. "She's a therapy cat, not a party trick," Cerise explained to one neighbor who'd wanted Leora to appear at a birthday party with a petting zoo and bouncy castle. "She needs calm environments to do her work effectively." The neighbor had nodded, not offended. "That makes sense, thanks for explaining." By the end of May, they'd found a sustainable rhythm. Leora did her Sunday reading sessions at the community center, plus one additional visit per month to the elementary school. She spent her other time on her patio, on her heated mat, or following Ansel and Cerise around the apartment as they continued unpacking and organizing. The new normal was busier than the old one, but also more stable. The lower rent gave Ansel breathing room in his budget. The ground floor location was easier on Olav's arthritic joints. The screened patio gave Leora outdoor access without danger. Everything they'd built was holding together, growing stronger through repetition and adjustment. But one question lingered, unspoken between them. What happened if circumstances changed again? If Ansel had to move for work, or if Cerise's schedule shifted, or if some new regulation appeared? How many times could you rebuild home before the foundation started showing cracks? Memorial Day weekend arrived with the kind of weather that made people remember why they tolerated winter. Cloudless blue skies, temperatures in the mid-70s, light breeze carrying the smell of blooming flowers and cut grass. The apartment complex transformed into a social hub, with residents bringing folding chairs and small grills onto the lawn, children running between buildings, and cheerful American flags appearing on nearly every patio. Ansel had Monday off from the hardware store, rare for a holiday weekend. Cerise had originally planned to visit her sister in a neighboring state, but cancelled, claiming work commitments, though Ansel suspected she was reluctant to leave Leora during their first major holiday in the new place. The complex management had organized a potluck picnic on the main lawn, scheduled for noon with grills provided and a promise of hamburgers and hot dogs for anyone who showed up. The flyer appeared on Ansel's door the previous Tuesday, cheerfully encouraging all residents and their furry friends to participate. "We should go," Cerise said when she arrived Sunday evening for the news ritual. "It's good community building, makes us more established as residents." "With Leora?" Ansel asked doubtfully. "That's a lot of people and noise. We'll bring the carrier. Set it up on the edge of the crowd where she can watch but not be overwhelmed. If she gets stressed, one of us leaves with her immediately." It was a reasonable plan built on their accumulated experience with Leora's tolerances. But reasonable plans and reality didn't always align. They arrived at the picnic early, claiming a spot under a large oak tree at the edge of the lawn. The location offered shade and a buffer zone from the main gathering area. Ansel set up 2 folding chairs, while Cerise positioned Leora's carrier on a blanket, door open, creating a safe retreat option. Leora emerged cautiously, assessed the situation, and promptly returned to the carrier. "Smart cat," Ansel murmured. The picnic filled in gradually. Families with small children, elderly couples, single residents. Several people brought dogs on leashes, mostly well-behaved but excited by all the activity. The noise level rose steadily. Conversations, music from a portable speaker, children shrieking with play, dogs barking their greetings and warnings. Leora stayed in her carrier, visible but protected. Several people stopped by to say hello. "That's the therapy cat, right?" asked a young mother with a toddler on her hip. "My son's preschool wants to know if she can visit in the fall." "We can talk about it," Cerise said, slipping into the diplomatic language they'd developed for these situations. "Send me an email and we'll see if the timing works." The woman nodded and moved on, already distracted by her child reaching for something. Tom, the leasing agent, appeared with a plate of potato salad. "Glad you could make it. How's the apartment working out?" "Great," Ansel said honestly. "No issues at all." "Good to hear. Let me know if you need anything." Tom crouched down to peer into the carrier. "Hey there, Leora, you hiding from the chaos?" His voice was gentle, his approach slow. Leora stayed in the carrier but didn't retreat to the back. Small progress. The picnic continued pleasantly for about an hour. Ansel and Cerise ate hamburgers and made small talk with neighbors. Leora remained in her carrier but seemed calm, her body language relaxed if watchful. Then a dog got loose. It happened fast. A beagle, young and poorly trained, slipped its collar while investigating the grill area. Its owner called out, but the dog was already running, excited by freedom and interesting smells. It bounded directly toward the oak tree, toward interesting new scents in that direction, toward Leora's carrier. Cerise saw it coming, started to move, but the dog was faster. It shoved its head up to the carrier entrance, barking enthusiastically, tail wagging with the force of its excitement. Leora exploded backward, slamming into the back of the carrier with a yowl of terror. Her asymmetrical hearing meant she couldn't locate the threat properly. The dog was simultaneously too loud and too close, filling her sensory world with overwhelming danger. Ansel grabbed the carrier and pulled it away, while Cerise bodily blocked the dog, hands out, voice firm. "No, back. Go to your owner." The dog's owner arrived seconds later, breathless and apologetic, clipping the leash back on. "I'm so sorry, he slipped right out. He's usually better than this." "It's fine," Cerise said, though her heart was hammering. "Just get him secure." They didn't wait to see if Leora would calm down. Ansel grabbed the carrier, Cerise grabbed the chairs and blanket, and they retreated to the apartment without saying goodbye to anyone. Inside, Ansel set the carrier down in the living room and opened the door. Leora didn't emerge. She was pressed into the back corner, pupils enormous, breathing fast. "It's okay," Cerise said softly, sitting on the floor near but not touching the carrier. "You're safe now. That was scary, but it's over." They waited. 10 minutes passed. 20. Finally, Leora crept forward and stepped out of the carrier. She immediately ran to the patio and pressed herself into the corner where the screen met the wall. "She's self-soothing," Ansel observed quietly, going to her safe spot. They left her there and retreated to the kitchen, giving her space. "That could have been worse," Cerise said, though her hands were still shaking slightly. "If the dog had actually gotten to her, if it had been aggressive instead of just excited." "But it didn't," Ansel said, "and we removed her immediately. We protected her. This time." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. You couldn't prevent every unexpected event, couldn't control every variable. The world was fundamentally unpredictable, and Leora's particular vulnerabilities meant that unpredictability was exponentially dangerous. "Maybe we're pushing too hard," Cerise said, bringing her to community events, accepting every request for appearances. "She's not built for that kind of constant exposure." "She's built for structured environments," Ansel agreed. "Reading sessions with quiet children, calm library visits, not chaotic outdoor picnics with loose dogs and crowds. So we pull back again, limit her appearances to situations we can actually control, and accept that some people will be disappointed," Ansel added. Cerise nodded slowly, her well-being over their convenience, always. That evening, they maintained the news ritual but adapted it. Instead of the living room, they brought the television closer to the patio and watched through the screen door. Leora stayed in her corner, but responded when the weather forecast jingle played, her ears swiveling toward the familiar sound. Slowly, over the course of the forecast, she moved closer, By the time the segment ended, she was pressed against the screen door, just an inch away from Cerise's hand on the other side. "Can I try?" Cerise asked softly. She opened the door slightly, just enough to reach through, and extended one finger. Leora sniffed it, considering. Then she pressed her face against it, seeking the familiar touch. The purring started, rough and uneven, but present, choosing connection despite the earlier fear. "You're okay," Cerise whispered. "We've got you." The next day, Ansel emailed Tom with a carefully worded message. They appreciated the invitation to community events, but Leora required quieter environments to function well. They'd be selective about future appearances, focusing on structured programs where her needs could be appropriately accommodated. Tom's response came within an hour. "Totally understand. Let us know what works for you. We're glad to have you both here. No pressure, no guilt, no bureaucratic resistance, just simple acceptance of their boundaries." "This place really is different," Ansel said, showing Cerise the email. "Or we're different," Cerise suggested. "We know what we need now." We're not apologizing for protecting her. Over the next week, they declined 3 appearance requests: a dog-focused charity event, a multifamily barbecue, and a Meet Your Neighbors gathering in the community room. They accepted one: a single classroom visit at the elementary school, scheduled during quiet reading time with only 15 children present. The classroom visit went perfectly. Controlled environment, familiar activity, predictable structure. Leora sat through 3 separate 15-minute reading sessions, calm and attentive, purring for each nervous child who stumbled over difficult words. "She's teaching us," Cerise said on the drive home, "not the other way around. She knows what she can handle. We just need to listen." Ansel glanced at Leora in the carrier, already grooming herself with unconcerned focus. The panic from the picnic had dissipated. She'd processed the fear, returned to her baseline, and was now simply existing in the present moment. "We've been worried about whether we're doing enough," Ansel said slowly. "Accepting enough appearances, contributing enough to the community, proving her value. But maybe we've already done enough. Maybe just being here, being stable, being consistent is the actual accomplishment." "You think we're done proving?" Cerise asked. "I think we're done performing," Ansel corrected. "Leora has a home. She has routines. She has people who protect her boundaries. That's the whole goal, isn't it? Not to turn her into something she's not, but to let her be what she is safely." Cerise considered that while they pulled into the apartment complex parking lot. "So we just say no to things that don't serve her well-being, even if it disappoints people." "Especially if it disappoints people," Ansel said. "Their disappointment is not our emergency." It was a philosophy shift, from proving Leora's right to exist to simply asserting it as fact. No more defensive accommodation, no more strategic visibility, just the quiet claim that this was enough. She was enough. They were enough. That evening, Leora sat on her patio during the sunset, watching birds settle into trees for the night. Inside, Ansel assembled the last remaining unpacked boxes. Cerise updated the reading program coordinator about their revised schedule. 2 sessions per month, confirmed well in advance, no last-minute additions. The apartment was finally fully settled, and so perhaps were they. June arrived with humidity and the kind of heat that made the air feel thick. The apartment's air conditioning ran constantly, and Leora discovered that the tile floor in the bathroom was the coolest spot in the entire place, spending long afternoons stretched out like a small grey puddle. Ansel was at work when the envelope arrived, sliding through the mail slot with the quiet thump of official correspondence. It was addressed to current resident, but had the Riverside Commons logo printed in the corner. He opened it that evening, Cerise reading over his shoulder. It was a notification about updated pet policies, effective August 1st. All residents with pets needed to provide updated documentation, current vaccination records, proof of spay, neuter status, and verification from a veterinarian that the animal was healthy and not a nuisance risk. "This is new," Ansel said, scanning the letter. "Tom didn't mention any of this when we moved in." "It's not necessarily bad," Cerise said. "We have all that documentation already. It's just paperwork." But the timing felt significant. They'd spent months fighting bureaucracy at the old place, and just when they'd found somewhere that seemed free of those complications, new requirements appeared. Ansel called Tom the next morning, keeping his tone neutral and curious rather than confrontational. "Oh, that," Tom said. Yeah, corporate decided to standardize policies across all their properties. It's not specific to Riverside Commons, just a company-wide thing. Honestly, it's pretty reasonable. Just making sure everyone's pets are actually legal and healthy. What happens if people don't comply? Ansel asked. They get a warning first, then a deadline to fix it. If they still don't provide documentation, it becomes a lease violation. But most people have this stuff anyway, so it shouldn't be a big deal. After the call, Ansel relayed the conversation to Cerise. She nodded thoughtfully. We should update everything anyway. Get a fresh health certificate from doctor. Levin, make sure all the vaccinations are current. Compile everything into a folder we can submit. Like what we did for the HOA inspection, Ansel said. Exactly. Preemptive organization. They made an appointment for the following week. Dr. Levin did a full examination, updated Leora's rabies vaccination, which was approaching its expiration, and provided a notarized health certificate suitable for housing documentation. The total came to $167, more than Ansel had budgeted for the month. He charged it to his credit card and made a mental note to pick up an extra shift at the hardware store. This is the third time we've done a comprehensive documentation build, Cerise observed, as they compiled everything into a presentation folder. HOA application, building inspection, now this. It's becoming routine, Ansel said. Which is either good because we know how to do it, or concerning because we keep having to do it. They submitted the documentation a week before the August 1st deadline, personally delivering it to the leasing office rather than trusting it to the Dropbox. Tom accepted it with a quick glance. This is way more thorough than anyone else has turned in, he said, flipping through the pages. Most people are just bringing in vaccine cards. We like to be complete, Cerise said. What she didn't say was that they'd learned the hard way that incomplete documentation created opportunities for rejection. Better to overwhelm with information than leave any gaps. The notice of approval came via email 2 days later. Standard form language confirming that Leora met all requirements and was authorized to remain in the apartment. No conditions, no exceptions, no provisional status, just simple approval. Another checkpoint cleared, Ansel said, filing the email in a folder he'd created for exactly this kind of documentation. But the process had reminded him how precarious security always was. One policy change, one new requirement, and everything could shift. They'd built a stable life for Leora, but stability required constant maintenance. A week later, Marcus from the reading program called with an unexpected question. Would you be willing to be profiled for our annual donor newsletter? We like to feature successful therapy teams, and you and Leora have been consistently excellent. Cerise's first instinct was to decline. More visibility meant more exposure, more chances for something to go wrong. But she paused, considering. What would the profile involve? She asked. Just an interview, maybe 15 minutes. A photo of Leora. Basic information about how you got involved with the program and what it means to you. We'd send you the text before it goes out, so you can approve everything. Can I think about it? Sure. Let me know by next Friday. She discussed it with Ansel that evening. He developed the same instinct. Keep things quiet, maintain low profiles, avoid unnecessary attention. But we're not hiding anymore, Cerise said slowly. We don't have to be defensive. The documentation is solid. She's certified. We're established residents. Maybe visibility is actually protective now rather than dangerous. Explain, Ansel said. If Leora is publicly known as a successful therapy cat, featured in newsletters and recognized in the community, she becomes harder to challenge. People don't revoke privileges for animals that are publicly serving important functions. The visibility creates a kind of social protection. Ansel considered that. So instead of flying under the radar, we go fully public. Own the story rather than hide from it. Exactly. They agreed to the profile. The interview was conducted over the phone, with Cerise careful to emphasize Leora's training, certification, and positive community impact. The photographer came to the apartment, capturing shots of Leora on her patio, looking serene and professional. The newsletter came out in early July, distributed to donors and community partners. Leora's profile was on page 3, with a lovely photo and a paragraph about her journey from uncertain stray to certified therapy cat, who's helped dozens of children build reading confidence. The response was immediate and surprising. Emails came to the reading program office asking about Leora's availability. The elementary school requested her for their fall reading kickoff event. A local senior center inquired about whether she could visit their facility for a pet therapy program. "We're getting famous again," Cerise said, scrolling through the forwarded requests. "We're getting overbooked," Ansel corrected. "We need to manage expectations." They developed a simple system. Leora would maintain her 2 per month reading sessions as baseline, plus 1 additional appearance per quarter for special events. Everything else would be politely declined, with a standard response emphasizing their commitment to Leora's well-being and the importance of not overscheduling therapy animals. Some people were disappointed, but most understood. The requests kept coming, but Ansel and Cerise had learned to say no without guilt. "Remember when we were desperate for anyone to give her a chance?" Cerise asked one evening, after declining yet another invitation. "Now we're turning down opportunities." "That's what success looks like," Ansel said. "Having choices instead of scrambling for options." But success brought its own pressures. At the August reading session, a woman Cerise didn't recognize approached with professional interest. "I'm Sarah Chen, Regional Coordinator for the State Therapy Animal Registry," she introduced herself. "I've been hearing wonderful things about your cat. Have you considered certifying her at the state level? It would open up more facilities, allow hospital visits, nursing homes, crisis response situations." Cerise's immediate internal response was resistance. More certification meant more requirements, more documentation, more oversight. They'd fought so hard to reach this sustainable balance. Why risk disrupting it? But she kept her voice neutral. What would state certification involve? Sarah explained the process. Additional behavioral testing, specialized training modules, quarterly check-ins, comprehensive insurance documentation. The certification took about 3 months to complete and cost approximately $500 in fees and training expenses. "I'll need to discuss it with my partner," Cerise said. "Can I contact you after we've considered it?" "Of course." Sarah handed over a business card. "No pressure. You're already doing excellent work at the local level. State certification just expands your options." Options. That word again. It sounded positive, but Ansel and Cerise had learned that options often meant obligations in disguise. They discussed it that night, going through the pros and cons with the systematic care they'd developed over months of difficult decisions. Pro. More facilities means more impact, Cerise said. Kids in hospitals, elderly people in nursing homes, people in crisis who need comfort. Con. More commitments mean less control over schedule, Ansel countered. Hospitals don't work around our convenience. Emergency response situations are unpredictable. Pro. State certification makes her even more legitimate, harder to challenge, more officially protected. Con. More oversight means more chances for something to go wrong. One incident, one complaint, and we're dealing with state bureaucracy instead of just local programs. They went back and forth, neither fully convinced in either direction. Finally, Cerise said, "What does Leora get out of it? Not us, not the programs, not the people we'd help. What does she personally gain from state certification?" Ansel thought about that. "Nothing really. She's already doing work she handles well. Adding more just increases her stress." "Then we decline," Cerise said. "Not because state certification is bad, but because it doesn't serve her interests. This has always been about building a life that works for her, not about maximizing her productivity." They sent Sarah a polite email explaining their decision. She responded with understanding and an open invitation to reconsider if circumstances changed. "We just turned down an opportunity most therapy animal handlers would celebrate," Ansel observed. "We prioritized her well-being over impressive credentials," Cerise corrected. "That's not turning down an opportunity. That's choosing wisely." The choice represented a shift in how they thought about Leora's role. She wasn't a project to be optimized or a resource to be maximized. She was a small cat who needed consistent routines, manageable challenges, and people who protected her boundaries. Everything else was secondary. September brought the kind of weather that felt like a gift after summer's oppressive heat. Cool mornings, warm afternoons, evenings that invited open windows, and the smell of fall approaching. The apartment complex prepared for the change of seasons. Maintenance crews planting mums in the flower beds and adjusting sprinkler systems for reduced watering schedules. Ansel had been living in the new apartment for 5 months. The space no longer felt new. It felt like home. He could navigate in the dark without thinking, knew which cabinet doors squeaked, understood the building's particular sounds at different times of day. Leora had her established territories: the patio during morning and evening when the light was soft, the heated mat during the warmest part of the afternoon when she needed the least supplemental warmth, the bathroom tile floor during the hottest hours. She knew which neighbors walked dogs at which times and would watch for them from the patio, tracking their daily patterns with the same attention she'd once given to survival calculations. The reading program's fall session started the first Sunday after Labor Day. Cerise arrived to pick up Leora as usual, but this time a boy was waiting outside the apartment building, bouncing on his toes with poorly contained excitement. "Tyler," Cerise said, surprised, "what are you doing here?" "My mum said I could come early and help bring Leora to the community center," Tyler said. "I've been practicing reading all summer. I have 3 new books to show her." He'd grown several inches since that first nervous session back in February. His voice was more confident, his posture less hunched. Reading had become something he was proud of, rather than something that triggered anxiety. "That's very responsible," Cerise said. "Want to help carry her things?" Tyler carried Leora's blanket and the bag with her brush and treats. He chatted the whole walk to the community center, telling Cerise about the books he'd read over summer break, about starting 4th grade, about how his teacher had asked him to help other kids who struggled with reading. "I told them about Leora," Tyler said, "about how she just listens and doesn't care if you mess up. My teacher said that's what good listeners do." At the community center, the usual setup was waiting, but today there were more children than normal, a new group starting the program. Marcus introduced them to Leora with practiced ease, explaining the protocol. "Approach slowly, no sudden movements. Let the cat come to you." One girl, probably 7 years old, hung back from the group. She held her book so tightly the paperback cover was bending. "That's Maya," Marcus said quietly to Cerise. "Selective mutism. She doesn't speak at school at all. We're hoping Leora might help." The session began. Tyler read first, fluent and confident, showing off his new skills. 2 other returning children read next, comfortable with the routine. Then it was Maya's turn. She sat down with her book, unopened, silent. Leora, who'd been on her blanket, stood up and walked over. She did something she'd never done before. She climbed onto Maya's lap and settled there, purring. Maya's hands loosened their death grip on the book. She looked down at Leora with wonder. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. "You don't have to read out loud," Cerise said gently. "Leora likes listening to pages turning too." Maya opened the book. She didn't read aloud, but her lips moved, silently forming words. Leora stayed in her lap the entire 15 minutes, warm and present. When time was up, Maya whispered something so quietly that Cerise almost missed it. "Thank you." 2 words, barely audible, but Marcus heard them too, and his eyes went bright with professional excitement. First words in months, spoken to a therapy cat. After the session, parents gathered to pick up their children. Tyler's mother found Cerise and Ansel, who'd arrived to help pack up. "I wanted to thank you both," she said. "Tyler's reading scores went up 2 grade levels this year. His teacher says he's one of the top readers in his class now." "That's all Tyler's work," Cerise said. "Leora just listened." "She did more than listen," Tyler's mother said. "She gave him a safe space to practice being brave. That's not nothing." Tilda Corvin appeared as they were packing Leora's carrier. She was moving more slowly than she had back in winter, her arthritis obviously bothering her. "I wanted to tell you both something," Tilda said. "Auric passed away last week, peacefully, in his sleep." "I'm so sorry," Cerise said sincerely. "He had a good long life," Tilda said. 16 years. But I've been thinking about what comes next. I'm too old to start over with a kitten, too tired for a young cat's energy, but I miss having a feline around." She paused, looking at Leora, who was grooming herself in the carrier. "I wondered if you might know any cats like Leora. Calm, well-adjusted, already past the kitten stage. I called the shelter, but they said you'd be better at knowing who might be a good fit." Cerise and Ansel exchanged glances. This was unexpected but significant. Tilda, who'd been instrumental in helping them secure Leora's approval, was now asking for their expertise in finding a cat. "We can ask around," Cerise said. "The shelter usually has adult cats who need homes. Older cats get overlooked, but they're often the best companions." "I'd appreciate that," Tilda said. "And if you find someone suitable, tell them Auric's old person is looking for a new friend." The conversation stayed with Cerise for days. They'd started this journey as people desperate to help one specific cat. Now they were being consulted as experts, asked to help others find similar connections. A week later, Cerise visited the county shelter where she'd first volunteered, before Leora. She hadn't been back since finding Leora at the adoption fair, too consumed with making that situation work to have energy for anything else. The shelter coordinator, Janice, greeted her warmly. "Cerise, it's been ages. How's your cat working out?" Cerise pulled out her phone and showed photos. Leora on her patio, Leora with Tyler during a reading session, Leora stretched out on the heated mat. "She's certified as a therapy cat now," Cerise explained, working with a reading program. "She's helped about 30 kids over the past 8 months." Janice's expression transformed. "That's incredible. We knew she was special, but I had no idea. Would you be willing to write up her story? We're always looking for adoption success stories, especially ones this compelling." "Actually," Cerise said, "I'm here about a different cat. I have a friend looking for an adult cat, calm temperament, already socialized. Do you have anyone who fits that description?" Janice led her back to the cat room. Several adult cats watched from their kennels with varying degrees of interest. But one caught Cerise's attention, an orange tabby, probably 8 or 9 years old, with a calm dignity despite the shelter environment. "That's Rusty," Janice said. "Owner passed away. Family couldn't keep him. He's been here 2 months. Great cat, but people keep passing him over for kittens." Cerise took a photo. "Can you hold him for 24 hours? I need to confirm with my friend, but I think he might be perfect." She showed Tilda the photo that evening. Tilda looked at it for a long time, her expression soft. "Can I meet him?" Tilda asked. "I'll set it up," Cerise said. The meeting happened that weekend. Rusty and Tilda regarded each other with the mutual assessment of experienced beings who'd both lost someone. After 10 minutes of careful introduction, Rusty jumped into Tilda's lap and started purring. "I'll take him," Tilda said simply. The adoption was processed that afternoon. Cerise helped Tilda set up her apartment with supplies, drawing on everything she'd learned with Leora: unscented litter, stainless steel bowls, quiet spaces for retreat. 2 weeks later, Tilda called with an update. "He's settling in beautifully. Very calm, very affectionate. I think he was lonely at the shelter." "Probably," Cerise agreed. "Adult cats bond just as deeply as kittens. They're just quieter about it." "You should do this more," Tilda said, "matching people with appropriate cats. You have a gift for reading both sides of the equation." The comment stayed with Cerise. She mentioned it to Ansel during the evening news ritual, which had remained unbroken through all the transitions and changes. "Tilda thinks I should help people find cats," Cerise said, absently stroking Leora's face as the weather forecast played. "Do you want to?" Ansel asked. "I don't know. It would be time-consuming. But I keep thinking about how hard it was to help Leora, all the barriers and complications. What if there was someone who helped navigate that process, someone who understood both the practical requirements and the emotional investment?" "Like a cat adoption consultant," Ansel said thoughtfully. "That sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud." "No," Ansel said. "It sounds like something actually useful. Most people don't know what they're signing up for when they adopt. Having someone guide them through it, especially for special needs situations, that could prevent a lot of failed adoptions." Cerise turned the idea over in her mind. She'd need to research similar services, figure out if there was actual demand, understand the logistics. But the seed was planted. That night, after Cerise had gone home, Ansel sat on his patio with a beer, watching the last light fade from the sky. Olaf was snoring on his bed inside. Leora was on her heated mat, already settled for the evening. He thought about where they'd been a year ago. Leora living on a porch step, him fighting with an HOA, both of them trying to survive circumstances that seemed designed to prevent it. They'd been desperate and resourceful, scrambling to solve each problem as it appeared. Now they had routines, systems, a sustainable structure that protected Leora while allowing her to contribute to the community. They had expertise earned through hard experience and networks built through consistent presence. They'd transformed desperation into stability, one small decision at a time. His phone buzzed with a text from Cerise. "Talk to Janice about volunteering as an adoption counselor. Meeting next week to discuss. This feels right." Ansel smiled and typed back, "It is right. You know what you're doing now. Help others learn the same things." Inside, Leora stretched and moved from the heated mat to the patio door, pressing her nose against the screen. She could smell the evening air, hear the distant sounds of the neighborhood settling into night. Her right ear swiveled, tracking familiar patterns, the college students' guitar music starting up, the Matsuda's dogs making their final trip outside, car doors closing as residents returned from evening errands. Her world was predictable now, safe, built by humans who'd learned to understand what she needed and had committed to providing it month after month, challenge after challenge. She'd survived by choosing wisely and being chosen in return, by trusting when trust was warranted and accepting help when it was offered, by adapting to human structures while maintaining her essential nature. Everyone had said she'd never survive. People who saw a stray cat with a hearing problem and assumed failure was inevitable. But they'd been measuring the wrong variables. Survival wasn't about perfection or overcoming every obstacle. It was about building something sustainable with the resources available, about finding people who would meet you where you were instead of demanding you be something else. Leora had survived by being exactly herself and by finding humans willing to build a world around that authentic existence. As the last light faded and the motion sensor triggered the porch light's familiar double blink, Leora turned from the screen and walked back to her heated mat. Tomorrow would bring another morning, another routine, another day of small, predictable comforts earned through patience and care. She'd proved them all wrong, not through dramatic triumph, but through persistent, quiet existence, through showing up day after day in the space that had been carefully constructed to welcome her. And that, in the end, was the whole point. Epilogue. The following spring, Cerise officially launched Second Chance Companions, an adoption counseling service that connected potential cat owners with shelter animals while providing realistic guidance about care requirements, costs, and commitments. Her first client was a young couple intimidated by the adoption process. Her 10th client was a widower who, like Tilda, needed companionship but felt too old to start over. Each success built on lessons learned with Leora: the importance of matching temperaments, the reality of financial costs, the value of patience and consistent routine. Ansel continued working at the hardware store, but started teaching evening workshops on basic home repairs. The classes were popular with apartment dwellers who wanted to handle simple fixes themselves. He was practical and clear in his instructions, having learned through experience how to break complex problems into manageable steps. Leora maintained her reading program schedule, 2 sessions per month at the community center. Tyler moved on after a year, confident enough to no longer need her support. But there was always another quiet child, another anxious reader, another person who needed the non-judgmental presence only an animal could provide. The evening ritual never changed. 6:30 news, weather forecast jingle, gentle petting while storms and sunshine were predicted with equal certainty. It was the anchor that held everything else in place, the one constant through all the transitions. Some things, they had learned, were worth protecting absolutely, worth building an entire life around, worth fighting bureaucracy and overcoming obstacles and spending money they could barely afford, because in the end, it wasn't about the cat. It was about the choice to show up, to commit, to say you matter through actions repeated until they became unbreakable bonds. Leora had proved everyone wrong simply by being welcomed into a space where she could finally, fully belong. And sometimes, that's the whole story. Not dramatic rescue or miraculous transformation, but the quiet persistence of care offered and accepted day after ordinary day until ordinary becomes extraordinary through sheer accumulated devotion. A message on second chances. The story of Leora reminds us that survival is rarely about dramatic moments. It's built in the small choices, the bowl of water placed beside a porch step, the willingness to try unscented litter when the first choice fails, the decision to keep showing up even when progress feels impossible. We often underestimate what's possible when we commit to understanding rather than imposing, when we adapt our expectations to reality rather than demanding reality conform to our plans. Leora survived because people saw her not as a problem to be solved, but as an individual deserving of the specific support she needed. That recognition, repeated through countless small actions, became the foundation of home. The same principle applies beyond cats and beyond adoption. Everyone deserves to be met where they are, understood for who they actually are, and supported in ways that honor their particular needs. That's not enabling or lowering standards. It's the basic requirement for building anything sustainable. Some said she'd never survive. They were measuring only obstacles without accounting for the power of committed, informed care. They forgot that survival is a collaborative act, something we build together through patience and attention, and the willingness to adjust when the first approach doesn't work. Leora proved them wrong quietly, by simply existing in a space carefully constructed to welcome that existence. We could all do worse than learning that lesson, that sometimes the greatest victory is creating a place where survival becomes not just possible, but predictable. Where fear transforms into routine, and routine becomes the foundation of peace. In the end, it's never too late to start over, to find your people, to claim your spot in the sun. It just requires finding those willing to build the world you need, one small adjustment at a time. That's the real message. Hope is a structure, built with consistency and protected with boundaries, and everyone deserves architects who understand that.